A man was screaming, not from pain, but from terror. My wife, my children. The Nazi officer had chosen him to die. 10 prisoners would be starved to death as punishment for one escape. No one moved, no one spoke, because in Auschwitz, speaking could get you killed. But then, one man stepped out of line, a thin Catholic priest, weak from beatings, starving like everyone else, and he said words that stunned even the Nazis. I want to take his place. The guards froze, the prisoners stared, because nobody volunteered for death in Auschwitz. Nobody. But this priest did, and his name was Maximilian Kolbe, the man who walked willingly into a starvation bunker, so another father could live. But what makes this story even more unbelievable is that Auschwitz was not the beginning of his sacrifice. It was the final chapter of a life already completely surrendered to God. This is the story of the Saint of Auschwitz. Before he became Maximilian Kolbe, he was simply a poor Polish boy named Raymond. Born in 1894, in a Poland crushed under foreign occupation, his childhood was filled with poverty, political unrest, and hardship. His father worked as a weaver. His mother struggled to care for the family. Life was difficult, but something happened when Raymond was still very young, something that would define the rest of his life forever. One day, after being scolded by his mother for misbehaving, Raymond went to church alone. He knelt before an image of the Blessed Virgin Mary and began to pray. And according to his own testimony, Mary appeared to him. In her hands, she held 2 crowns, one white, one red. The white crown represented purity. The red crown represented martyrdom. And Mary asked him, "Which do you choose?" Most people would hesitate. Most people would choose comfort, safety, a normal life. But the young boy answered, "I choose both." And from that moment on, everything changed. At 16 years old, Raymond entered the Franciscan seminary, and he was brilliant. He studied philosophy, theology, science, mathematics. He even sketched ideas for flying machines and rockets long before modern space travel. But intelligence was not what made him extraordinary. It was his intensity. Maximilian believed the modern world was losing its soul. He saw hatred growing, violence spreading, faith weakening, and he became convinced that the answer was not political power, but radical holiness, especially through devotion to Mary. In Rome, he witnessed anti-Catholic demonstrations in the streets, and instead of retreating in fear, he launched a spiritual movement. In 1917, he founded the Militia Immaculati, the Army of the Immaculate. Its mission was bold: to win the whole world for Christ, through the Immaculate Virgin Mary, not with violence, not with hatred, but with sacrifice, prayer, truth, and love. And Maximilian was not interested in building a small devotional group. He wanted a spiritual revolution. Long before social media, long before YouTube, long before viral content, Maximilian Kolbe understood something powerful. Media shapes souls. So while others preached only from pulpits, Kolbe used magazines, printing presses, newspapers, radio, mass communication. He founded a publication called The Night of the Immaculate, and it exploded in popularity. Thousands became readers, then hundreds of thousands. Eventually, over 1 million copies circulated. And to support this growing mission, Kolbe built an enormous monastery city in Poland called Niepokalanów, the City of the Immaculate. At its height, it became one of the largest Catholic monasteries in the world. Hundreds of friars lived there. Printing presses operated day and night. Catholic evangelization spread everywhere. But Maximilian was not finished, because his dream was global. Most people would have stopped there, but not Maximilian. In 1930, he traveled to Japan. He barely spoke the language. He had almost no money, no guarantees, no security. But he trusted God completely, and somehow, against all odds, he built another monastery near Nagasaki. People thought he was crazy, especially because he chose to build it on the side of a mountain, in a location many considered impractical. But years later, when the atomic bomb devastated Nagasaki, the monastery survived largely intact because of its location. Even today, many see it as one of the most astonishing moments connected to his mission. But the world was changing. Darkness was rising in Europe, and soon, Maximilian would return home to face evil face to face. In 1939, Hitler invaded Poland. World War II had begun. The Nazis quickly spread terror across the country. Arrests, executions, disappearances, fear, and while many fled, Maximilian stayed. At Niepokalanów, he transformed the monastery into a shelter. Thousands of refugees passed through its doors, including many Jewish families. Food was shared, beds were offered, lives were protected, and all of this happened under Nazi occupation. The Gestapo noticed. They watched him closely, because dictators fear people who cannot be controlled, especially holy people. Maximilian was arrested once, released, and then arrested again in 1941. This time, he would not come back. The Nazis sent him to Auschwitz, prisoner number 16,670. The camp was hell on earth. Starvation, disease, beatings, executions, smoke rising endlessly from crematoriums. Every day was survival. But even there, Maximilian remained a priest. Witnesses later remembered him sharing food, hearing confessions secretly, comforting the dying, praying beside prisoners in terror. The guards beat him brutally. Once, he was nearly beaten to death. But still, he refused to hate. Because for Maximilian, love was stronger than fear, and then came the moment history would never forget. One prisoner escaped Auschwitz, and under Nazi policy, 10 men would die in retaliation. The deputy commander walked down the line, pointing randomly. You. 10 men were chosen. One of them, Franciszek Gajowniczek, collapsed in despair. My wife, my children, and suddenly, a thin Franciscan priest stepped out of line. This alone could have gotten him shot instantly. The commandant demanded, "Who are you?" Kolbe answered, "A Catholic priest." Then he said, "I want to die in his place." Silence. Even the Nazis were stunned. Why would someone volunteer for death, especially for a stranger? But after a moment, the commandant agreed. Franciszek was spared. And Maximilian walked calmly toward the starvation bunker, not screaming, not resisting, not collapsing in fear, walking, willingly, toward death. The starvation bunker was designed to break men psychologically. No food, no water, no light, no hope. The prisoners were expected to scream, curse, fight, go insane. But something unexpected happened inside that bunker. Witnesses later said they heard prayers, hymns, the rosary, and at the center of it all was Maximilian Kolbe. He comforted the dying, led prayers, strengthened terrified prisoners. The guards opened the bunker expecting madness, but instead found peace. One by one, the prisoners died. But Kolbe remained alive. After 2 weeks, the Nazis wanted the cell emptied, so they injected him with carbolic acid. Witnesses say he calmly raised his arm for the injection. It was August 14, 1941, the vigil of the Assumption of Mary. The woman who had once offered him 2 crowns, purity and martyrdom, had kept her promise, and Maximilian had kept his. The man Maximilian saved survived the war. Franciszek Gajowniczek spent the rest of his life telling the world what happened. Because how do you explain something like that? How do you explain a stranger dying for you? Every extra birthday, every family moment, every sunrise, existed because another man chose sacrifice. Franciszek would later attend Kolbe's canonization in Rome. Imagine that moment, the man who should have died, watching the church declare his rescuer a saint. In 1982, Pope John Paul II canonized Maximilian Kolbe as a saint, and not simply a martyr, but a martyr of charity. Because he was not killed for refusing to deny the faith, he chose to give his life out of love. And that distinction mattered deeply. Today, Saint Maximilian Kolbe is remembered around the world, patron saint of prisoners, families, journalists, the addicted, the broken, the forgotten. His story has become one of the most powerful testimonies of Christian love in modern history. Not because he preached beautifully, not because he built massive ministries, not because he became famous, but because when confronted with absolute evil, he chose absolute love. Most people spend their lives trying to save themselves, protect themselves, preserve themselves. But Maximilian Kolbe did the opposite. He gave himself away, completely, and in doing so, became unforgettable. Because real love is not proven when life is easy. It is proven when sacrifice becomes terrifying, when fear becomes overwhelming, when walking away would be understandable. Yet you choose love anyway. Kolbe entered Auschwitz as prisoner 16,670. But history remembers him differently, as the priest who stepped forward, the saint who chose another man's life over his own. And maybe, his story leaves us with a question. If love demanded sacrifice from us, would we step forward too? Follow for more stories of saints who didn't just believe, they lived it. And sometimes, they died for it. Because the story of Maximilian Kolbe reminds us, even in the darkest place on earth, love can still win.